And then it became the House of Horrors. It's dark, 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 dark times.
You moved to Austin, and then how long are you in Austin for?
I probably lived in Austin for close to a year, and within that year was when I got my break, is when I met CeCe DeVille, Poison. Those guys were in town, and they were on that Flesh and Blood tour, and they were out, they still had songs in the top 10, hit songs, videos on MTV. They were playing arenas, headlining that tour, and he was in town, and he came in a bar that I was playing, and I saw him, and I immediately knew who it was, and I just went up to him, and I said, "Hey, man, I just wanted to say hi," and he was really nice and gave me a big hug and said, "I like your band." And I said, "Well, come sit in with us." And he said, "Yeah." So he came up and sat in with us, and that was where it all started. That was how I got my big break, He invited me to the show the next night, and he took me backstage, and we went and hung out on the bus afterwards, and he just pulled me aside and just goes, "Look, man, I'm really unhappy, and I want to do my own thing, start a new band, and I want you to play drums, and I've got this singer named Joey C. Jones, and I want you guys to come out to LA and let's do it." And I was just, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I'm like, whoa, what I always dreamed about having, that big break happening, that thing as a kid, a lot of people dream about, like, I just lay in my bed as a kid and dream about getting discovered by a famous musician. It's like, well, that happened. I got to live that dream.
And so from there, are you aware of Sweet Savage?
I never knew a Sweet Savage, but Joey got on my radar when CeCe told me about him. So CeCe had been aware of him for years, and Joey had also been friends with Bobby Dahl, and Bobby Dahl and Joey's wife, their wives were friends, so they knew each other. So Joey had a real deep and long Poison connection that went back for years, but I didn't know of Joey until CeCe decided he wanted to start a band and told me about him. And then when that all happened, actually, I gave him my number. We hung out, at his concert. He told me all this stuff. And then I didn't hear from him for about a year. And I tried to call him, and he would never call me back. I was just like, oh my God, my big break is like all falling apart. It's not going to happen. And I was just, oh my God, it was like the worst time in my life. But I got a gig with a cover band down in San Antonio, and it was paying really good. And I was like, okay, well, onward and upward. So I moved to San Antonio, and that's when I got the call from him. I remember seeing the Poison on the MTV award show where CeCe had done his hair pink, and he was just a real mess. And the band, train wrecked, and it was just a mess. And he literally quit the band right after that.
Rumors that the rock band Poison is on its last legs may turn out to be true, according to lead singer Bret Michaels. In an interview in the new issue of Rip magazine, Michaels says the guitarist CeCe DeVille and bassist Bobby Dahl, who've been rumored to have serious drug problems, have in fact both checked into drug treatment programs. "I can't tell you right now what will happen to us," says Michaels, who's currently touring with his girlfriend, singer Susie Hatton. Addressing DeVille and Dahl, he says, quote, "Here's your ultimatum, get it together or split."
So I remember watching that in my apartment, and I'm like, wow, he may be calling me. Well, he called me like a couple nights later, and he's like, "I'm sending you a ticket. You're coming out to LA. Joey's already been out here." So he sent me a ticket to come out for the weekend to kind of do like an audition or whatever, see how it went. And I flew out, and he had a guy pick me up at the airport, and man, I'd never been to LA, so I was overwhelmed in a good way, but it was just all very surreal to a kid in their 20s. They took me up to his house, which is that famous house that he lived at, all white, multi-million-dollar mansion, and just overlooking LA. I mean, I'd never experienced anything like that. It was what you see in the movies. And then he finally, I hung out for a couple hours because he was still sleeping, and this was at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I'm like, wow, this guy really sleeps late. He must party like a rock star for real. And he woke up, and we hung out for a little bit, and then we had a jam, and we played like about a verse of a song, and he goes, yeah, that's it, you got the gig. He just wanted to make sure I was playing like he remembered me playing, and I just hung out for the weekend, and it was incredible. Sam Kennison would come up and hang out, and we would just jam and make all these plans about after the holidays. I was going to go back home, spend the holidays with my family, and then after New Year's, I was going to come back out to stay and live with him. And Joey was going to come and live there too, and he did. And when I got there in January to stay, Joey had already moved in, and Joey and I shared a room for about 3 months up at CeCe's house. And all we did was stay up all night jamming and writing songs and partying and slept all day. And that's literally all we did. And then, we would do a photo shoot for some magazines, the new band, doing some press, and then we'd do the whole cycle over again. And after about 3 months of that, and nothing really happening, except we got about 5 or 6 songs written, and we had pictures and posters in every magazine, but we couldn't get a record deal. And I remember seeing Cece and I were watching TV one afternoon, and Nirvana came on, Smells Like Teen Spirit, and we were both tripping out on Dave Grohl because we were like, whoa, this guy's a monster. Look at him play drums. He's an animal. And I just had this epiphany. I had this moment where I'm like, wait a minute, this is the new scene. This is the new sound. And Poison and all those bands were the old sound. And it was just like I saw the page, the chapter turning, and I'm like, I got to get out of here, man. This isn't going anywhere. And it certainly wasn't any good for my spiritual and mental health, partying as much as we were doing. Because, you know, when you do that every day, when you're living in some strange, weird unreality, you just don't feel right after a while. And after 3 months of that, I'm like, I gotta check in with my folks and go back home and at least just kind of get my head together. And when I did, I kind of knew that was it. This version of the band's over, because I just didn't really see how I was going to come back out and live in his house again and start that cycle up again when we didn't even get anywhere in the first 3 months. The whole thing started up again, but he had a bunch of different guys. He had Kelly Hansen, and he had Tommy Hendrickson and James Kotak, and all that really became of it was they did a song for that Pauly Shore movie soundtrack. They did that version of Hey Good Looking, which was great, but CeCe was going down a slippery slope, man, and he was just a mess. He was just in bad shape. He needed to go to rehab and get out of that house, and it was just becoming a real dark scene. And I kind of felt like I escaped just in the nick of time.
It was just like the heart of darkness, you know. It was like, you know, like Coppola film or something. When you're proverbially in the gutter, morally in the gutter, death is almost welcome. There's been many times when I'd be like, boy, you know, to die here would be a lot easier than just having to go on.
What's like a typical day when you're staying at that house? Is like just the same thing?
Man. I was kind of usually one of the first to wake up and come to, you know, at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I was so excited about being out there. I wanted to go into Hollywood and down on Melrose and to go see all this stuff. And so CeCe had all these cars and he had this Jeep. So I would kind of get up before everybody else would. And then I'd venture down the hill. I'd go down the Hollywood Hills and I'd go driving around and just start coming to, because we were just partying all the time. But it was, you know, you're young and you're kind of resilient and you can kind of function the next day. And I'd go down on Melrose and Hollywood Boulevard and explore around and then come back up to the house about 4 or 5. And those guys would be up. And then we just get some food and we just get some beers and party supplies and go in there and start jamming. And it was like we had a concert set up. CeCe had 3 full stacks, and I had to have a PA system for my drums just so I could hear him, because he played so loud. And we would just jam all night, and I would have to like eat every hour or something just to keep up the stamina, because, you know, he was on rocket fuel and he would stay up all night. And, you know, I love playing music, but I don't like playing music for 6 or 7 hours straight. Let's get in and get done what needs to be done. I just don't want to like jam all night. And so that kind of became frustrating. Once the excitement and the magic and the newness of all that wore off, the reality kind of set in, and you're like, well, what are we doing? I mean, we're not in the studio. We're not recording. We don't have a rehearsal space. We're literally doing this in the house. And that's just where he felt safe, hiding out from the world in his palace and jamming music. And he really didn't need to hurry up and try to get a record deal. He had money. I think he was, for the first time in years and years and years, he was just enjoying live, you know, being alive and playing music with some guys he liked. And I kind of think he was playing music with some guys that could really play. I mean, not to toot our horns, but I love Poison, but they were never known as the greatest players in the world. And finally, CeCe's like, well, I get to play with great musicians that can kick ass and that can keep up with him, because he was definitely the one in the band who was a great musician and just never got credit for it because of the unfortunate, you know, the rest of the band were not great musicians. Not to knock their success, they were great. You know, they wrote great songs and, you know, but you know the deal.
Sure. Yeah. But, you guys aren't making any money, so how are you guys you're just supported? He's bringing in food and shit like that?
Yeah, I mean, CeCe had an account with this place called Pink Dot, which was down on Sunset Boulevard, and it was like a grocery store deli, and they make deli sandwiches, and we would literally call Pink Dot every day, and we'd get like tons of beer, turkey sandwiches, pasta, you know, we just kind of ate like bachelors. He would just order up food anytime we wanted it. We were like homebodies in the $1 Million Palace at the top of the hills, living the rock star life, but really not being rock stars. It was kind of strange and wonderful, but kind of got a little, it got strange toward the end of it because you were like, well, what are we going to do? I mean, can't we get a record deal? And he couldn't get anybody to really take him seriously. And it just goes to show you, man, when you spend all your time partying, it just derails all your plans. No matter what you're doing, at some point or another, it just makes it so you can't get anything really serious done.
Were you doing the rocket fuel as well?
Yeah, listen, we were all, man. We were guys in our 20s and no real families. I mean, Joey had his family and his little girl, and the pressure was more, I think he was probably feeling the pressure more than anybody. I mean, I was just footloose and fancy free. I was just like, whoa, I've made it. I'm a rock star now. I mean, I didn't have any rent to pay. I didn't have a family to take care of, but Joey had a little girl and a wife, and he had to pay the bills. So I think there was a lot of pressure on him. He was the one in the band that had pressure on his shoulders to get this thing going.
With the CC House, any other standout moments from there? Any moments? Sam Kinison?
Every night was strange. I mean, one night Ron Jeremy comes up with some quote unquote friends, and that was an interesting evening. And Sam Kinison comes up with his wife and hangs out all night. He and CC are high, and they're walking around the house from room to room singing opera at the top of their lungs. And these parties were fun, and they were surreal and strange and wonderful, but after so long you're just like, I just want to go lay down in the dark and quiet and go to bed. And it was kind of hard with that kind of insanity going on at any day, and you just never know who was going to show up.
Were girls running through there?
Not so much, which was strange and sad all at the same time, because it sure would have been a lot more fun if there were. But it was just kind of a lot of rock and rollers, and CC's friends would come up. But it wasn't like big parties. It was just like you'd have some people over and hang out, and we'd be jamming and partying. And then we'd play some pool, and you'd go up on the deck by the pool and overlook the lights of LA and see the twinkling lights, and it was just magic. You were just like, wow, where am I, man? This is right out of a movie. And I just remember seeing the twinkling lights of LA when in that Motley Crue video that they had, like about their second record, Nicky was parked up on the top of the Hollywood Hills, and he was sitting on his Corvette, and you could see the twinkling lights of Hollywood all beneath him. And I'm like, wow, this is where that's at. So, I mean, it's still a magical view if you go up there at night. I've been out here almost 30 years. And if I'm driving up in the Hollywood Hills, which is a rare occasion at night, and you grow up and you see that view, it's still a sight to behold.
And then you have access to all his cars, huh?
Yeah, man. One of the funny things that happened was he had this little red Mitsubishi Jeep that I would drive, and that was kind of like my car. That would be my car if I wanted to go down the hill or go somewhere, or go get my hair done or whatever. And so the guy who lived with him, his name was Robbie, and he was kind of his assistant and kind of took care of him, and he had a room in his house. And Robbie had this BMW, and so Robbie would drive everywhere in the BMW. Well, one night Robbie decides to take the Jeep. And so he goes down to the tattoo parlor and hangs out down on Sunset where they all hang out at. And then he came back up, and it was a quiet evening. I don't think we were really doing much. And so I was going to go somewhere the next morning, and I said, hey, Robbie, I went out to the garage, and the Jeep was parked in front of the garage, but there was no Jeep. And I'm like, where's the Jeep? And he goes, I don't know. I go, did you drive it last night? He goes, yeah. And so he came outside, and the Jeep was gone. And so we had no idea where the Jeep was. So we started walking down the hill, and CC lived right at the top of the hill. And literally, if your car came out of park, you better have your wheels turned the right way, because it was going to be bad. Well, this Jeep rolled all the way down the Hollywood Hills, and it bounced off cars, and it bounced off houses and hills, and made it down to like from the 4,000 block to like the 2,000 block of his road. And it did so much damage. It was unbelievable. When CC found out, he blew a gasket, man. He had to pay out all this money to all these people for insurance because that Robbie took that car and didn't put it in park. And it was, I mean, at the same time, it was hysterically funny because it was like straight out of a movie. But you were just like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And then we traced the wake of destruction where the Jeep did. And you were like, yep, it hit that car. Yep, it hit that pole. I see that it hit that. And you could just see how it went down the hill. The Jeep was totaled. I didn't have a car to drive after that, but I left not too long after that. So I guess it really didn't matter. You got to realize that he's up there in the house, and it's like his neighbors are like Ice-T on one side, Burt Reynolds on the other side, Diana Ross right above him. I mean, this was just like, it was crazy where we lived and the people you would see out.
Was there any furniture in the house? I always heard there wasn't.
Very little. All white with white marble floors and huge windows overlooking all of LA, and purple accent. It was really like the epitome of like the guitar player for Poison's house, you would think. He had a custom-made white marble pool table with a purple top. It was really cool, and this electric blue, like that you would think CeCe would have in his house, and these big C's on his door. The door handles were C's. It was crazy, but not a couch or anywhere to crash out. It was just like empty. It was just a big party house. Every once in a while, like Steve Lukather would come hang out with CeCe. They were buddies, and the Bullet Boys would come up. And every once in a while, you had some people that would come up and say hi and have a jam and party a little bit. But it wasn't like a big parade of people, night and day coming through.
Doing that kind of stuff, there's always that veil of darkness, I would think.
Well, dude, he was doing so much of it. I mean, he was having literally like the mafia drug dealer come over and bring him bricks of cocaine to the house. And it was getting so dark, he started freebasing it. And this was after I left. I went and visited him up at the house once I came back to LA, and his teeth were all rotted. He was like 80 pounds, and he looked like a troll. He looked horrible. He looked like he was going to die at any moment. I was so sad for him. And people had come up to the house, and it looked like a homeless person lived in the house. It was just dirt everywhere. It was unbelievable. I mean, I was walking around with my jaw on the floor. I couldn't believe how bad it had gotten. And people had come out to the house, and little by little, his gear had gotten stolen. People would take a guitar or an amp, and all his good guitars got stolen. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was just like the dregs of how bad it had gotten, and the vibe had gotten up there was just dark, man. It was dark. And
nobody was living there at that time when you came to see him?
Well, I think the guy Robbie was still living with him, but it's just like, what do you do, man? What are you gonna hog tie the guy or put a straitjacket around him, or it's just you can't really do that. He's the guy. He's gonna say if he wants to get help or not. Thank God it wasn't too late, and he didn't die, and he got help.